في أكبر الكتب.
Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lambcast. I believe this is episode 813, and we're going to be looking at The Mandolorian and Grogu. Now you're probably asking, am I in the right place? Because this doesn't sound like Richard. You are in the right place, but you're right. I'm not Richard. My name is Matt Poirier, and I am filling in for him this week. I've been on the Lambcast before, so you may remember me, but I have a site, the direct-to-video Connoisseur, which started in 2007, and while, as the name suggests, I don't get out to the theater that much, I did make it to see this one, and I'm excited to discuss it here today. I'm also excited to introduce our guests, who are no strangers to Lambcast fans. First, we've got Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast. Welcome, Todd.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. He's half man, half DeLorean. He's the Mandalorian.
Exactly. Perfect. Excellent. And also from Mundane Adventures of a Fangirl, we've got Jeanette Ward. Welcome, Jeanette.
This is the way.
This is the way. Exactly. Or at Burger King, it's the "this is the way" meal instead of the "your way" meal or something like that. That's what. Exactly.
I actually thought that was a good tie-in. I saw a
pretty
commercial
good.
of that the other day. I was like, yeah, okay. Kudos to whoever the marketing guy was that courted Burger King, I guess.
Right, exactly. It was for sure.
You
They also have
gotta
cups
say
and stuff like
it's
that.
a great Star Wars tradition to have some quality marketing tie-ins.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I know Burger King retired the king, the creepy, like, plastic mask
I love
thing.
that guy.
They could have brought him into this movie in some way. That would have been nice,
Yeah.
but no.
Right,
No.
exactly. Yes. He would have been great as one of those.
In the background or something.
Imagine replacing every scene with the twins with just the king instead, and it still would have worked.
Yes, I totally agree. Well, maybe without any further ado, we'll get in and we'll start discussing our thoughts quickly. Though, as is the case with most Lambcast episodes where we talk about a movie that is in the theaters, the opening piece will be, spoiler free. We're just going to give our general thoughts on the movie. So if you haven't seen this yet, you're safe for now. But when the spoiler wall comes down, we are going to get in deep, giving away all kinds of things with this movie. I also should warn you, don't go to IMDb if you don't want spoilers, because just listing the cast gives spoilers. So but we'll kind of just get in. We'll start with our initial thoughts. So maybe Todd, why don't we start with you? I'm going to go in the order of the way the pictures are on my Zoom thing here. But Todd, if you want to start, what did you think of The Mandalorian and Grogu?
I mean, I enjoyed it for the most part. I mean, I think it is certainly less of a spectacle, let's say. I mean, I think, a lot of us we go into a Star Wars movie, with the expectation of it being an event. I mean, especially for those of us that are of the generation where we grew up with Star Wars as a new thing. I was 6 years old when the first Star Wars came out. So it very much is what turned me into a movie fan. And so saying that, it's hard to disappoint me because I am just so in love with this galaxy that, I even if they do something that is not the way that I would have done it, I'm still, for the most part, very accepting because I just like spending time in this world. Okay. I'm the guy that 2 years ago, when I went to see Galaxy's Edge at Walt Disney World for the first time, cried when I'm standing in front of the Millennium Falcon. Okay. So, I think that there certainly are some issues when it comes to the structure of things. The people that are saying this feels like they just took what would have been the next season and kind of mushed it into a 2-hour thing that could play in movie theaters. It's a valid point. Okay. But does it have moments that I was just like that 6-year-old kid again? Like, oh, I'm like, yes, absolutely. There are plenty of those moments. So even in the points where it may be dragged a little bit, or I was sitting there going, maybe this should have been a series, still, I'm in the theater watching Star Wars, and that's worth a lot to me. So
Excellent. Yeah, I kind of felt the same way about some of that. But yeah, Jeanette, how about you? What were your
Yeah.
overall thoughts?
Same. Honestly, I feel like that's Todd. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I was also in the theater in 1977. I was 6 months old at the time. My parents wanted to go, didn't want to get a sitter, and so I'm told I behaved very, very well. One of my earliest memories is the Wampa. So like 1980, I would have been 4-ish, 3.5, and yeah, that's one of my earliest memories is just seeing that ice creature in person. You know, yeah, I was absolutely delighted. I went in knowing this was going to feel like a large episode or like a 3-episode arc. I think I knew some of the behind the scenes stuff of like, I think Favs and Filoni wanted to make Favs and Filoni, your favorite yacht rock duo from the early 70s. Favs and Filoni, I think, wanted to make a new season, and I believe the money people and Iger and those folks were like, no, we need a movie. So I think I went in with that expectation, and I still felt like, yeah, this is what a delight. That's how I've been describing the movie. The movie is an absolute delight. Yes, same thing. I would have been happy with, I think Filoni has like 2 modes. One is let's dive deep into the politics and the philosophical aspects of the Force and what it means for the dark side and the light side and those who live in the middle. And so like those episodes of his animated series are very heavy. And then you get the episodes where the whole episode is just the droids. Like this is very much for kids. This felt like very much family friendly for the kids. Everybody can have a good time. I have been crash watching this seasons of The Mandalorian the last couple of weeks to be ready, just in case. Didn't need to. This is very much a standalone. If you've never seen any of the episodes of the show, you can go to this and have a great time. It's, an action-packed, like I said, family-friendly adventure. Feels like Skeleton Crew. Feels like the Battle for Endor. It's in those lines. It very much was a good time. And I think, yes, there were some scenes that got a little repetitive, a little draggy. Like there's some characters who give the same speech 2 to 3 times, and I'm like, we understand, man.
Yeah,
we get it. But I'm fine with that. And also, I think, like Todd said, like the third act spent the whole time with a smile on my face. I was deliriously happy. I was like, this is just such a delight. Look at the Star Wars we're getting on the big screen. I got my popcorn, not in my $80.80 AT&T bucket, just in a regular bucket. Well, I did buy the commemorative metal bucket. But, it was just so fun. I had a good time. Yes, when I went to Galaxy's Edge for the first time and you come around the corner and see the Millennium Falcon, I also cried because there it was in front of me. You can't beat that feeling. And I think this movie is a movie that understands that feeling, doesn't cater to it as hard as maybe it could have. And I think that's a benefit because it just ends up being a delight for everybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I could, agree with everybody. I'm a little bit. I'll say I'm a little bit more critical of some parts of it, but I think overall I also had a great time with it. Yeah, in terms of me being a Star Wars fan, I guess my earliest memories of it would be in 1983 when I was 4, and my mom, she was a nurse, so she worked nights, so she was the mother on the street who got all the kids off to school because she was home in the mornings. And one of the neighbor kids, he had a red Return of the Jedi lunchbox, and I traded my Pigs in Space lunchbox with him for that day. So that was my introduction. And of course, my parents got me all the figures and everything. And of course, you grow up in the 80s with, every Christmas you've got Star Wars on. And, and I think for me, the Mandalorian TV show was maybe kind of some of the most exciting stuff for me since the movies, those original movies. And I was a little disappointed with the 3rd season because I think to your point, Jeanette, about it being, or, this movie being a standalone, the 3rd season felt more serialized than the previous 2 seasons, where the previous 2 seasons it felt like they were getting things done within the episode, even if there was a story arc that kind of overarched. And I really like that this movie went back to that kind of standalone feeling where there isn't really anything left that, it's not like, I think maybe it's good to watch the series to kind of understand the relationship between the Mandalorian and Grogu. But for the most part, you could take people who have never seen the Mandalorian and Grogu, and they'll see it. I think the other thing for me going to the theater was this is the first movie I think I've seen in I don't know how long where I saw a whole range of generations. You know, so
Yes.
from like Generation Alpha, the kind of the youngest generation who they love baby Yoda, they love Grogu, but I saw baby boomers here as well. So I thought it definitely hit that point. I think for me also. I love that it was like, especially in the middle, it felt like a mix of Blade Runner and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where I've got like this Blade Runner setting, but I've got these action set pieces that are so Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where one thing is moving into something else and everything. And I think my brain was very velocitized for when we get to that third act and things kind of grind to a bit of a halt. It's like I'll say when I hiked Mount Katahdin in Maine, when you go up past the University of Maine in Bangor, the speed limit goes to 75, but there's so few cars that you can go 100 easy. And I remember my buddy drove 100 the whole way. Then when we got off the highway in Millinocket, it's a 50-mile-an-hour state road, and we felt like we were going 20. And my brain was velocitized, I think, when we got to that third act, that I felt like, oh, come on, let's get it moving here. Let's get to that big end scene and everything. But I think that's maybe, I don't know. I mean, granted, I was also kind of hopped up on caffeine from the soda and all that stuff. So maybe I was just ready to get moving here. But I think that maybe it's a nitpick more than it is like a docking it, a lot. Because I think I came out of the movie overall feeling like I had a great time. And I think that's ultimately the thing.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying there, and trying not to get spoilery yet, but there is a chunk of the film as it leads into the final boom moment, let's call it that. Okay, where we've got a lot going on and it's very exciting and it's what you want out of Star Wars. There's a very slow chunk that leads up to that, and it's the kind of thing where up to that point there's been a lot of momentum, and so it suddenly slows down quite a bit. It does kind of cater more to the younger audience in that moment as well, so I can get where some of the folks might be, that might bring them down a bit, where they were thinking the movie was going to keep on a different trajectory. But I liked those moments. I mean, that's some of the best Grogu moments.
I was going to say it's the part of the movie that caters to the second half of the title.
Yeah.
Right,
and
the
I mean,
TV show was just the Mandalorian. In season 3, like you say, could have been Mandalorians, which I want more of, but I know not everybody watching the show wants. But yes.
And I mean, you're talking about things that cater to different ages here. I mean, yes, I think as you watch this movie, you can see where they are putting bits and pieces of things in here that are, meant to appeal to the different age groups. I mean, I loved some of the action sequences that are the just down and dirty. The only way I could think to describe it is like John Wick style fighting going on here, and so it's interesting when you compare a moment like that to moments where you've got Grogu and those little I forget their names. I just always say Babu Freaks buddies, that whole thing.
I think it's Azalians.
I think so. We got an actor here who played them, or did the voice work for them. Anzalians, that's what they are. Yeah.
Anzalians, okay.
Or Anzelians, I don't. Yeah.
I'll go with it.
Yeah.
And Zelens. They're very Star Warsy.
Yeah, whatever. They're a choking hazard if they're an action figure. That's the point. Yeah. So.
They're absolutely in Lego sets. They'd be a minifig.
Yeah. But there's a lot here that just it gets into that thing that, as someone that grew up with Star Wars, that I like, where it's seeing more of the world and fleshing out the world, and things that maybe aren't necessarily questions I always had, but it's like fun to see, like, oh, look at that, look at how the Hutts live, that type of thing. So I dig getting to see that kind of stuff. And maybe that's 6-year-old me talking, but I don't care.
But that, I feel like that's absolutely who this movie is for. So yeah, it did make me want some. Nothing ever makes me want DLC content for some of my video games, but this one made me want a DLC Nal Hutta version for Battlefront. Like, let me play on that world, because it was the Hutt homeworld, surprisingly more beautiful than I was expecting, but also
Yeah.
more fungal, like swampy, but on the fungal side of swampy, and everything looked like it smelled not the best. Very natural, very muddy, very swampy, but not sweet smelling.
I liked the idea that, it's kind of just a hobby that the Hutts have, that, they all have a trap door that has some creature in it, apparently.
Clearly ingrained in their culture. I mean, there's an episode of the Mandalorian where he's trying to get on a public flight, and they're like, "You got to lock up your weapons," and he goes, "I'm a Mandalorian. Weapons are part of my religion." I feel like the Hutts would be like, "No, I'm a Hutt, a pit with a monster, and it is part of my religion."
Yeah. And that's what, I mean, I don't think this is a spoiler because
No.
it shows up in the trailer, but this creature, to me, I think is one of the most terrifying creatures I've seen in Star Wars yet.
Seconded.
I dug this thing. I forget what they called it, some kind of a snake dragon or something like that.
Dragon snake, I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
snake dragon, dragon snake, whatever. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's a fun sequence with that thing. It looks intimidating, it moves intimidating. Just the fact that it's an albino, I don't know, for some reason that whole color scheme,
A lot of it was upsetting.
it worked on me.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, give me more of this.
Well, and I think too, when you watch just the series, but even just like the way they've developed this Mandalorian character, you needed something larger than life for us to believe that he would have trouble, and so I thought that was really great too. And then I think too, like what you're saying, Jeanette, about this being a standalone that anybody can go see. It's like, if you don't know who Jabba the Hutt is, then it's really more you than it is the movie, right? It's not like they were deep for a character to draw into this movie. So I thought that was good too, that they used the Hutts. And like you said, Todd, they built out that world more. We get to learn more about who the Hutts are.
Yep.
But also, everybody should know who Jabba the Hutt is. So it's not like it was like a surprise. It wasn't like they pulled Salacious Crumb or some like really deep cut character. It was like, that wasn't Admiral Akbar's story here. But even then, I think people would know who he is. But
it was the right usage of for those of us who are like, obviously we know who Jabba the Hutt is. He's one of the most iconic images ever created of the last, again, 50 some years of cinema. But if you don't, they're very clearly explained. I will say something I noticed in my rewatch of the show, and they do it a little bit in this movie. It's so handy to have the Mandalorian and Grogu's relationship, where Grogu is sitting on his shoulder for most of the movie, and so when exposition needs to happen, Mando can just explain things to Grogu, and we're all like, "Oh, got it. Okay, understand." When he's like, "Yeah, the Hutts, this and that, and criminal society and blah blah blah," and he's telling Grogu, but we're all like, for those of us who maybe didn't know, we're like, "Excellent, thank you for this explanation. We are now on board."
Yeah. I will say, since we're talking about the Hutts, I do think the movie has a little bit of a villain problem, just because it's very fuzzy throughout the film. There's several points in the movie where you're going, okay, so this is the villain. Oh no, wait, this is the villain. Oh no, wait, this is, and so you don't get quite the level of just Darth Maul, oh, Palpatine, whatever. You don't have that kind of villain moment. So that was a little frustrating for me, but I
think that's part of the aspect of this. Probably feels like a 3-episode arc of what would have been season 4, maybe fairly early in the season, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That maybe we find out, and I agree with you. They try to iron that out by the end of it, and I went with it. But it also feels like, had this been part of a season, we would have found the big bad was pulling strings, But we don't get to that point. Just the Hutts are the big bad in this movie, period. So.
Yeah. Well, and if it had been stretched out over a season, you would have had little nuggets here and there. Yep. They would have had time for a little bit more to plant the seeds, so that when you get the moment of villain comeuppance is a bit more satisfying. I mean, I liked it, but I thought it would have had more weight if we had more time in the movie where, okay, yeah, this is the big bad. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
more weight. That's a Hutt pun. I see what you did.
Okay, all right, yeah.
That was obviously the big controversy, right? Is that the Mandalorian was kind of the big hit for Disney Plus when it came out of the gate, and it was almost like this sense of like, oh, Disney can do no wrong, right? Because
why I bought Disney Plus.
There's a lot of people, right? Exactly, and I think people were saying like, okay, that's the reason why a lot of people were buying Disney Plus, and now you're you know, making this movie. But, you know, part of the thing I think was Disney Plus, they were doing well on subscribers, but they weren't doing well with their theatrical films. And they said, okay, we need a win theatrically. And then the Kimmel thing happens, and suddenly a bunch of people get rid of their subscriptions. And now it's almost like, oh, maybe you could have used another Mandalorian season. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll start with you, Todd. What did you think about this decision to go with a movie instead of another season of the series?
I don't have any problem with that. And I mean, part of that is just because I'm a movie guy. I don't spend a lot of time on TV shows. You know, there are many of these Star Wars series that I am desperately behind on, and you know, just need to get caught up and all that. So, you know, I don't have any problem with making it so that I can go to the theater and see something. That's my happy place, you know. So I don't have a problem with doing it this way.
Well, how about you, Jeanette? How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm perfectly happy to put this on the big screen. I think they did a great job of making all the set pieces big enough and seeing the huts on the big screen again. I think, yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it. I love the shows. Yeah, I think I got Disney Plus because I knew The Mandalorian was coming, but I also got it. I remember, was it the night that I got it that Endgame was then dropped on Disney Plus, and I just watched like the From On Your Left to I Am Iron Man like over and over and over. I was like, wait, I can just watch this bit over and over.
Yes.
And like right now on my Disney Plus, my Endgame is sitting at, I think it's like, it's either 2:15, 2 hours and 15 when the On Your Left starts. So it's just, I freeze it in that moment so I can just log in and watch that 15 minutes every time. It is also, of the streaming apps that I have, and let's be fair, I probably have too many, but of the ones that I have, it's the one I use the most, right? I feel like Disney Plus is the one where I would definitely say is worth every single penny between the Marvel and Star Wars for me, and then all the other stuff that's available. I love the shows. I loved Acolyte. I thought it was fantastic. I want more of that. I loved Skeleton Crew on the opposite end of like, Acolyte gives you a sexy bad guy. Like, let me seduce you with the dark side, literally. And I was like, yes, please. But then Skeleton Crew was like, here's a show for kids. That's very much like those, you know, movies in the 80s. That
it was the Goonies meets Star Wars. You
exactly.
know?
More of this, please. I want that. I loved Book of Boba Fett. I know that's a hot take. I loved it. I thought it was super fun. Give me more about a dude wandering around Tatooine trying to organize loose criminal organizations together that stars 2 60-plus non-white leads. Yes. I want that all day, every day. Please give me more Book of Boba Fett. I loved all the seasons of The Mandalorian. Like I said, I love season 3 because it dug into, like, let's get into the Mandalorian culture. Let's bring in Bo-Katan. Let's see how she's going to retake the planet after all this stuff it's been through. Yes, give me that. I still want a series that is, and Andor did a lot of, oh my God, Andor. Easily some of the best Star Wars we've ever gotten. I want a show that's like The West Wing, but it's the Galactic Senate prior to and through the Clone Wars and right up to like then Order 66 and after, like the formation of the rebellion inside the Senate, Bail Organa and Mon Mothma and more of that. And Andor gave me some, but then had to stop because it's the end of Andor's story. I want that story to continue past the end of Cassian Andor. So I want more of that show. Yeah, I love the shows, but yes, it's such, again, I feel like I'm going to overuse the word, but it was such a delight to go to the theater and see Star Wars on the big screen. I loved it. The sequel trilogy was not my Star Wars, but I was happy that Star Wars was on the big screen. There were parts of those movies I really enjoyed. But yeah, I really liked this movie.
Yeah, so for me, I guess I'm a little bit more of a zag in this case because I love the TV show aspect where it felt like it was like an old Western TV show. And my wife, just to full disclosure, she watches MeTV, and she loves to have the old Westerns on in the afternoons and just have them on in the background. And so I've watched them with her. But, there's an Instagrammer that I follow. I don't really follow him. He just gets suggested to me. But I think his name's Jason K. Pargan. I think that's how his name's pronounced, his last name, or Parjan. He's a writer who has an Instagram, and he was saying how The Mandalorian was set up to essentially be like Gunsmoke, where you could just make, he said not 600 episodes, but 200 episodes, and you could just keep going on. And for me, I felt like, okay, I've got like a mix of, Wanted Dead or Alive, Have Gun Will Travel, Wagon Train, when it starts to get into like going to different places. You mentioned having Grogu on his shoulder. That felt like The Rifleman, where, there's always that moment where Chuck Connors is explaining to his son who this person is and what they're about and all, the whole history. It had all those elements, and I was like, oh man, if they're going to transition this into movies, how am I going to feel about it? But I kind of felt like the way this movie went, it was almost like the old Batman series where they did the movie in the middle. And where it was like, I didn't feel like I was getting anything, it felt like it was a bigger version, it did what the movie theater could do at that time so I appreciate it that way. So I went in a little skeptical. I was a little nervous about how it was going to be, but I felt like, okay, this worked out. But I can also see why, the movie experience is something that, you can't just get, even when you try to even if people who have really great, which I don't have really great movie systems, watching this movie in the theaters, this was the first time I'd seen a Star Wars movie in the theater since Revenge of the Sith. So it's been 20 years since I've seen a Star Wars movie in the theater. And it was like a reminder of even if I'm going to like the movie or not, I should just go see it because it's an experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's sequences in here that I think do definitely benefit from the big screen. It's not. I think they would still be perfectly enjoyable at home, but like we said, that giant monster. I think there's just something about seeing it big there on the screen. There's a great dogfight sequence in this that I'm just like, oh yeah, this is the big screen kind of stuff I love to see. So yeah, I think while they kept kind of the rhythm of the TV show. I mean, you mentioned kind of that serialized thing. I think, this did feel a bit like watching, an old serial with several episodes strung, in one sitting type of thing. But still, I think they did enough here that, still was making it a big screen experience.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The first, as you mentioned, seasons of The Mandalorian are very much episodic, Western style, serialized. Yeah, here's a guy, he's got a job in this episode, he goes and does that job, and that worked great. I think the reason, and the mention of season 3 and why some people didn't love it as much, I did, but some people didn't love it. They were like, but this is too connected, I have to be watching every single episode, and now you're telling me a story about someone else who's not my main character. I don't need this. It's straight away from that episodic, very much, here's his assignment for this episode. He's going to go get this bad guy, turn him in. Great. He's getting his next assignment. That works. It's I know other shows have done it probably before and since, but I always think of it as the X-Files effect of where you have Monster of the Week or you have overarching story for the season, right? Is it a Man in Black episode or is it Monster Under the Bed episode? It's going to be, or Man in Black. Smoking Man. It's one of those two, right?
Yeah, it's like I remember I only watched a little bit of Smallville, but I had friends that watched a lot of Smallville, and they'd say, "Yeah, it's Freak of the Week," thing.
Freak of the Week, absolutely. Yeah, here's this week's meteor freak who can control bugs. Okay, great. Oh, here's an episode in which Lex is really digging into Clark's backstory, and that's going to connect to the greater. So yeah, absolutely. Smallville did it. I think X-Files and Smallville kind of paralleled each other for a number of years. So yeah, I feel like. And good shows still have that effect, right? Where it's like, okay, here's a standalone and here's one that contributes to the overarching story for the series. And I love that this is very much, throwback to the standalone episode. He gets a job, literally. It has kind of a cold open where he's finishing a job. You gotta have a good cold open.
It's great. It's like the opening of a James Bond movie,
it's
where
fantastic.
You're in the middle of another adventure,
And it serves, as those do, any good cold opening, it establishes, if we don't know this character, establishes his skill set, establishes the two relationship between them, establishes his job and what he's all about, and sets up the world. And then he goes back, gets a new assignment, does the assignment, comes back. Great. Perfect.
And there's tons of cool stuff in that opening that is that stuff that makes someone who's been a Star Wars geek for 45 years squeal, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like a little personal walker and all that kind of stuff. It's
walkers up in big AT-ATs walking up the side of a cliff is yes.
Oh,
more of that, please. Watching
that
a
scene, of
snowtrooper
course,
put the mask on. Why do these snowtroopers have such weird? And then you see one that literally takes that white thing and pops it up. I was like, oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes. And then we get the humor of the Mandalorian where, this bad guy that he's taking out in this first thing says, go up on the roof and get the middle. And he's like, but sir, we're pilots, And,
I love it. Oh my God. That bad guy and kudos to, and again, it's the Favs and Filoni effect of like the two main Imperials that they chased down in this movie were both featured in the show when they were setting up the Shadow Council, where they were in that Shadow Council as like holograms trying to set up, which is why the overarching, maybe this, we won't talk about that yet, but I think had this been a long, a set of episodes within it, we would have seen where this connects, because the two Imperials that they collect in this movie. But when he's in the room and as part of the cold open, and they realize that this Imperial is telling the people under his protection, yes, I'm going to raise your tributes because my protection is worth quite a bit, and just establishes how bad a guy is by shooting one of them who dares to question him. And then the Mandalorian is like coming into their base, and he unlocks a drawer, throws each of them a blaster, and says to them, "Lay down cover fire." And this group of like dignitaries looks at each other like, "Well, what?"
Yeah.
And he runs away, yelling, "Long live the Empire," as his personal elevator takes off. And the Mandalorian comes in, doesn't even have to say anything. They immediately throw down the blasters and point at the elevator.
Yes.
Great. Such a good comedy beat. I loved it.
Exactly. Well, I guess maybe if we're starting to maybe verge in on spoilers, should we get the spoiler wall down? Is there anything else before we do? All right. So again, for people that are listening, and hopefully you didn't, doze off. Sometimes, if you're listening to these late at night, maybe you fall and you wake up in the middle. You're gonna wake up in the middle of spoilers. So, but we're gonna lower the spoiler wall now. We'll take a beat here, and then we'll kind of get in. So maybe we'll start with you, Todd. Anything from the spoiler part that you wanted to get in on?
Well, I guess the main thing I wanted to talk about and get people's vibe on, that I thought was maybe a little spoiler to dig into, is Rada the Hutt.
Yeah.
I guess throughout the film, I was a little unsure about how I felt about the way the character was portrayed. I thought it was an interesting swing to bring him back. Because
for those of us who paid and went to see the Clone Wars animated movie in the theater.
I mean, I would have gone regardless, but my kids were young at the time. In fact, the other night, my son, who's now almost 24, we went to see Mandalorian and Grogu together, and he's remembering when we went to see the Clone Wars movie, and he probably was about 8 years old or something like that when that came out. I don't remember what year that came out, but anyway, so I was that person in my theater, the one weird guy that laughed out loud alone when they show the picture of Rada the Hutt. Say, "Oh yeah, we got a picture of him," and it's him from the Clone Wars.
Yeah, from that movie. I laughed so hard. I was like, "Oh my god!" I have the stuffed Rada in the backpack, the little itty bitty one where he's all squishy and cute, and
But I mean, so I was like, okay, well played, Filoni. But but as they bring the character out, I don't know. I kept on going back and forth because I was like, all right, this is kind of interesting. I don't know how I feel about, like we have this one honorable Hutt, I guess. And he's, when you were talking about speechifying earlier and a character saying the same speech over, I was like, okay, she's talking about Rada the Hutt, I think.
He's very, yes, his thesis is stated multiple times.
He's a bit too virtuous to me, especially for a character of a race of aliens that we've been, that has been shown to us to be nothing but scum up to this point. Okay. So it was maybe a little jarring. I'm not saying that Hutts can't be nice guys. Okay. I mean, sure, it can happen, whatever.
I mean, we've only really encountered 2 to 3 of them, and those have been terrible. So we shouldn't judge a whole species based on the 2 that
exactly. But the thing is, I was like, okay, if we're gonna have an honorable Hutt, I don't know. I think they almost went overboard and made him too honorable. And the fact that he, I don't know, the voice was almost too like, the chiseled chin hero type. I mean, he's like Superman almost the way they present him here. So I don't know. I kept on going back and forth. It felt a little bit odd to me. I thought we could have maybe eased into things. I would have liked to have seen a flaw in the character, but he's almost presented as too honorable. So I'm still kind of wrestling with how I feel about Rada the Hutt.
I will agree with you to a point. I think that I was like, do I need Rada? Do I need a gladiatorial Hutt? I will say that he did win me over. I don't care for Jeremy Allen White. I'll just say that. I find him to be meh. But the character won me over. This speech, which we get several times, and we can talk about that in a second. But then as we see him, and I would say his flaw is his naivete, is that out in the world, being sheltered as he was for so many years, right? This is a child of privilege. Let's be real. And then he gets out in the world and he's just like, yeah, well, this is what's going to happen because I was told, I'm fighting in this ring, but I've got one more fight and I'm going to win and it's going to be fine. No, like what he knows is that his aunt and uncle want him dead, but he thinks that everybody else is great, that the universe is wonderful. He belongs out here, being the freedom, because it's so much better than what he knew. And so that's subtle, and I might be reaching, but that would be the flaw that I would say, that because he is shocked by the fact that the bad Imperial guy turns on him. Like, come on, man. No, come on. So I would say that is, it won me over because just the execution of it. And at first you're like, is the CGI wonky? How do I feel about it? But I was able to let that go. It's a Star Wars movie. Please give me big monsters. I'm fine with it. Yeah, let me see the Hutt fighting. I was unprepared for how much I enjoyed watching a Hutt in the ring. Especially one who's skilled. The rolling, because of course they're going to roll. Of course they're going to use their body mass as a weapon. Like, he squishes folks. Delightful. He's great at hand-to-hand. He's great at his rolling. He's also overconfident in his skill set. I grew to appreciate him as a character. The bit of him when they land on the Delphi base, him and Grogu playing in the surf. I was like, oh come on.
Yeah, this is a nice moment.
I love it. Yeah, so yes, I totally get what you're saying, but I will say that by the end, Rada won me over, and I look forward to further adventures with Rada because he very much was like, hey, yeah, I'm going to join the New Republic. And I was like, yes, sir. Yes, get you a custom ship because you're not going to fit in. The bit when they're escaping and he has to like tear the center out of a speeder so that he can get into the speeder and then take off.
Yeah.
Yep. Love it.
And the gladiator stuff is cool. That's another one of those, moments that you're just like, okay, yeah, this is why I'm here. This is what I want to see. I love that they tie that in with, I forget the name of the game, the
Dejeric.
Yeah. And, that was one thing where I had to remind my son as we were driving home. It's like, did you recognize that stuff? He's like, I'm not sure. I was like, go back to the first Star Wars, okay? Yep. Let the Wookiee win. He's like, oh, so, and I love that they took, they did that move, R2's move of the guy throwing the one character down, and I was like, yep, that's the let the Wookiee win moment.
It's the picture everyone needs when you go to Galaxy's Edge and you ride Smuggler's Run. Sit at the table and take your picture.
Yes. Yeah, and I think for me, where he won me over is in that fight where he's fighting the Mandalorian to start with, and the Mandalorian wins, and he's essentially got one of Rada the Hutt's blades up against his throat, against Rada's throat, and the whole time Rada has been under this impression that everybody in the crowd loves him, that he's their guy, and then now they're all chanting "kill him." And he realizes, like, these people really didn't love me. They just loved watching me fight, and they didn't care. They don't care if I lose or, But here's the Mandalorian saying, "I yield," and he throws it down. And this is something that's come up a few times in the series, where, even though he's such a great fighter and he's great at beating everybody up and doing all this stuff, his mindset is fighting is a last resort. And here's a situation where he says, "I yield." I thought that was great. And I also love that when they bring out all those monsters, that's when it becomes Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where it's this big free-for-all where they're all fighting, and then they throw the electric one into the electric fence, and suddenly it goes from this big fight scene to a chase scene, and I always love that kind of thing.
Yeah, chase scene with monsters peppered throughout. Yes, and I think that it goes to Rada's naivete again. Like, he thought, these people love me. I'm their hero now. No, buddy. And the Mandalorian tried to tell him, like, Bloodsport is not. That feeling is not real. And he was like, no, they're cheering my name. All right, man. So I thought that was
Hutt's fighting. I loved where the moment at the end
the
where
Hutt Rada
and the twins are fighting. I was like, oh, this is this is fun.
I thought that was so fun to watch, and you're like, oh, but Rada's a trained gladiator at this point, but and I think it was interesting to establish, yeah, but he's still a kid in terms of Hutt years, and his aunt and uncle have been around a long time, and Hutts are gangsters, and who knows how they've had to defend themselves. Plus, there's two of them, so
Well,
he struggled, and he had
it's
just come out of a torture device.
it's one of those moments that kind of like I don't want to say opens your eyes, but it's one of those moments that kind of it explains some things that you've seen in previous iterations, and you're just like, oh, okay, now I kind of understand the dynamic a bit more. Like, when you think about the original Star Wars movies, and like I think when they were working on the prequels, I seem to remember a documentary thing where Lucas was saying like, well, in those films, the lightsaber play, that was old men fighting with it.
Yeah.
And now here we are in the Phantom Menace, and you see what the lightsaber
Yeah.
battles are like. You're just like, whoa. And so like in this one, we're used to seeing Hutts lounging around and smoking on their thing and eating frogs and stuff. And now in this one, we get to see why maybe they are as powerful
so
as they
feared.
are, why they're feared, because when we see them actually knock down, drag out, fighting with each other, it's scary looking.
It felt like a sumo match in a lot of ways because
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a lot of the slapping and the pushing and the moving and the just strength behind the bulk. I thought that was really well done and super interesting to watch. I enjoyed that a whole bunch. I will say there's a moment when Mando goes to see Rada and be like, hey, I'm here to break you out. Your aunt and uncle want you back. And he's like, no, they want to kill me, and I'm going to stay here. And he notices Grogu, and as so many people do, as Lizzo did in the show of like, hey, can I feed the baby? Rada's like, can I feed the baby? And I'm like, Jin, don't let him near this Hutt. That Hutt will eat him. And then Grogu goes in and he's feeding him, and Rada goes, I'm not my father. I'm not a monster. And I was like, oh, I took that personally. I had 100% judged Rada and assumed he was going to eat that baby. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I made such a bad judgment call.
Yeah, no, that was a perfect scene there because I think it kind of gives you a sense of who he is. I mean, the thing with the Hutts fighting that I appreciated too is that usually in movies, it's whoever is the most skilled fighter that wins.
Yeah.
And I remember when I watched The Expendables where Stallone set up Jet Li fighting Dolph Lundgren. And there's this, I think Stallone was like, well, in real life, Dolph Lundgren would crush Jet Li because he's also a skilled martial artist, but also Jet Li wouldn't be able to hurt him. Dolph's like twice his size. So he takes the fight into this like scaffolding area where Jet Li's able to use his smaller size and use Dolph's size against him to make it a more equal fight. And I feel like this movie was kind of like, yeah, sure, Rada the Hutt is a good fighter, but if he's punching a Hutt, the Hutt's still going to be this massive bulk, and they can kind of, they can mitigate a lot of what he's able to do as a fighter. And so then you just kind of see them kind of swirling around and stuff like that. And I thought that was really interesting. Also juxtaposed with the Mandalorian fighting against the bounty hunter who had come to take him. And then you've got Grogu with the dog. And they're all using their different skills and their different abilities in there. And, it's kind of what you want from a big end, sequence is that kind of thing.
The traditional Star Wars final fight happening on 3 to 4 fronts where you have to keep flipping back and forth between the different. Yeah, I love that.
By the way, folks, don't forget to mark your bingo cards there. Matt mentioned Dolph Lundgren, so that's a point.
I have. It's been a treat to see that he's been doing some of the new He-Man movie press tours with He-Man. Very charming.
I'm assuming he must be showing up in the movie somewhere,
God, I
but
hope
so.
Shouldn't he play the Prince Adam's father? Listen, let's not get into that. We can talk about that in whenever we do the He-Man.
He's playing Orko. That's what he's doing. No.
I have said that if the makers of this movie are brave, there'll be a scene where he's running, and it'll be the same scene 3 times. Anyway, moving on. So, yes, I love
on to our discussion of Masters of the Universe. Yes.
People who have listened to my podcast know that I am not good as a host at reeling in tangents. So, fortunately,
me especially. Well, like I wander off track so easy. I'm so sorry. But anyway, yes. Seeing that bounty hunter, because the bounty hunter was in a couple episodes of Clone Wars, maybe Rebels too, but that bounty hunter design is tremendous.
that was the character that, like I said, I'm not caught up on everything. My son had to say, "Oh yeah, he's from this and this." Yeah, okay, all right, I believe you. Yeah. So
The thing I didn't like about that, I will say, is that the movie sets up for like, the bulk of the point up into the point where that bounty hunter catches the Mandalorian. It sets up where the Mandalorian can take out 10 people at once. He can go into any situation. He's taking out these big AT-AT walker kind of things, and he's doing all that kind of stuff. But yet, this one bounty hunter is able to get the drop on him. And yes, he did kind of know what was happening, but then he didn't. And it felt like it was a little too easy. And I don't know if a better way to mitigate that would have been, instead of the bounty hunter catching him, if the bounty hunter catches Rado and he decides, we need to go save Rado. But, again, you don't get that moment where I felt the movie kind of ground to a halt, where you get Grogu's moment where he's sort of saving the Mandalorian after he got bit. But yeah, I was like, that was a little too easy for him to get caught there.
I will say that I feel like there are, and see, this is where we get into that, but is this demonstrated well enough in the movie? Sometimes the Mandalorian's a little overconfident and he can be a little stumble into a situation without thinking it all the way through as well. So I felt like that didn't surprise me. I mean, the bounty hunter catches him because he sets up a trap outside and basically lures the Mandalorian outside by threatening the kid. So that made sense to me. He catches him with an electrical net, I guess, which is how you catch Mandalorians because of all the armor bits. So I see what you're saying, but also I was like, all right. And then so we get into wait, is there anything? Oh, the Martin Scorsese-ness. This is to my thought the best use of Martin Scorsese. The only level of Martin Scorsese that I want is this amount. This is what I want.
But is it cinema?
And that's kind of what I wanted to be like. Yeah, shut this dude up. This is all I ever want to see him do. I don't want to hear him talk about how great he is or how cinema. This is what I want. Shut up and make a sandwich. That's it. Also, how quickly are we able to buy that sandwich in Galaxy's Edge? I believe it's already available.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no. I was getting a little hungry there. Yeah, it looked like a strange flatbread gyro or something.
If you don't follow Chef Roy Choi, or if you haven't watched the Chef Show on Netflix, you don't have to watch the whole. If you didn't, let me take a step back. If you haven't seen Jon Favreau's movie Chef, it's great. You should. It's a delightful movie. Again, it's basically him trying to win back. He's a high-powered chef. Again, to tie in the Jeremy Allen White of it, who falls from grace, opens a food truck, goes on a trip with his son, and then refines his love for food by making delicious Cuban sandwiches. Great. Delightful. Yeah, everyone enjoys it. If you stay in Park MGM in Vegas, which I recommend, there's a chef. The food truck is there in the lobby. You can buy the sandwiches and some really delicious food. And he had a show, the Chef Show, in which he, Favs and Roy Choi would go around and do different things. You don't have to watch the whole show, but there is an episode in which they cook at Skywalker Ranch. And you can learn a little bit about the gardens of Skywalker Ranch, who's in charge of them, how they feed the staff. Roy makes a big meal. Filoni comes in, cooks with him and Favreau, and they talk about what they're editing, what they're working on, and Filoni's a delight, Favreau's a delight, but mentions multiple times on how he is. I love Jon Favreau, but also Jon Favreau loves Jon Favreau, and that's fine. It's fine. I'll accept it. But so that episode is super fun. If you can find it on Netflix. It's in the Chef Show. Watching them cook together. Chef Roy Choi consulted on that sandwich for this movie, and he's in the credits. So the sandwich is legitimately a type of patty melt. The onions are just fried onions dyed blue, and then it's got a cheese sauce, and it's on them. And yes, based on Roy's, there's a video of him on his Instagram. He went to Galaxy's Edge to try it and is pleased with the result. So I cannot wait to try that sandwich.
The Rato roasters at Galaxy's Edge, I think, are really, really good. I like.
They're so good.
It was 2 years ago. In fact, I was looking at some Facebook stuff, and it's 2 years ago right now that my wife and I were there. And the first park we went to was Hollywood Studios, and so of course we made a beeline for Galaxy's Edge. And our lunch that day, we had Ronto roasters. Like, oh my gosh, this is like the best thing I'm going to eat the whole time. Loved it. But and I think, trying it back to the movie we're talking about.
Sorry.
Grogu had, when they're in the whole gladiator thing, he's got the little colored popcorn like they have at Galaxy's Edge too. Yep. So
They bring in that Grogu is always eating, and I find that delightful. He's like a little Brad Pitt. He's always eating in the show. That he's always eating in this movie is wonderful. Yes, sell me all that food at Galaxy's Edge. When the first time I went with my family, my brother and I, our parents who are older, we found a table in Galaxy's Edge and was like, all right, stay here. We're going to go grab food. And then we went to all the places that had food and just kept bringing back. Okay, here's this. Leave, come back. Okay, here's this. Leave, come back. This is this. So, yes.
Well, tell me you didn't think, so Mandalorian gets bit by the dragon snake. The Hutts laugh at him because they say, hey, that's poison. You're going to die. They
After removing his helmet and shaming him.
Right, exactly.
That's
like,
not the way.
Right, exactly. So he reconnects with Grogu and the Anzelians. They save him. They're escaping, and he tells Grogu and the Anzelians because he realizes the ship's not going to fit him. And he goes, okay.
The reveal of their ship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
right. So he's like,
God.
the ship's not going to fit him. So he says, Grogu, you go, get out of here. I'm going to do cover. And he's thinking, like, I'm done. I'm dead, and I've saved him. That thing has clicked in about what the Hutt said about how, Grogu is going to outlive you by hundreds of years. And, he's probably still going to be a kid when you die. And so this is all clicked for him. He's laying on the ground. It looks like he's fought off as many as he could, but now he's there. And there's a question.
He's the IG-11 unit from the very first episode of The Mandalorian, where every 5 seconds that droid is like, well, I can't be caught. I'm going to engage my self-destruct. Over and over. And this Mandalorian's like, well, I can't go with you. I'm going to please go. I got this.
Just shoot everybody out. Now, there's a point where you don't know if maybe they're going to write Pedro Pascal out of the show. This is where he's going to die. There's a possibility. But as he's laying on the ground.
Does the word The Mandalorian now refer to just Grogu?
Right, exactly. But then you see the bugs. And for me, I was like, the moment I saw the bugs crawl on him, I knew Grogu was going to come back because he was going to have to eat one of those bugs. And it was almost like this moment for me. It was like this moment of like, okay, phew, they didn't kill him off. This is it. I don't know if anybody else thought the same way. Or maybe you didn't think that he was actually going to die. I don't know.
I wasn't sure what to think. I was like, what bugs? I was like, what are these force bugs? What is this? I don't know.
It just reminded me of like, any swamp, man, don't sit down. Don't touch anything, because there's a whole multitude of life that you can't see, but can see you.
Yeah, especially in Star Wars world, right? I mean, Star Wars world is just like, it's,
I mean, that whole sequence, where
the
Mando
Grogu
is
piece of Mandalorian and Grogu.
It is. It's also the one that I think may cause some people to kind of. That could lose some people on this because, like I said, I think the movie's got solid momentum going, and then it really slows down in that moment. There's fun stuff there, but I know I was sitting there going, "Oh, I thought we were on the upswing. I thought we were heading towards the big finish here, and we are, but we take this kind of break for a good chunk of time, slows things down. There is some stuff there where I think it was maybe a little too drawn out. I wasn't sure about that whole sequence with Grogu and the guy that lives in the swamp. That I was like, yeah, okay, it's cute, but I don't know.
It's exposition that we needed that we maybe didn't. I feel like we got it visually, that the Mandalorian's poisoned, but we learned that from Grogu stealing the fish from this rocking chair guy, where the bounty hunter then comes up and says to it gives us information, but it also, that whole sequence I kind of loved because it really let the puppeteers work, right?
Oh yeah,
Grogu is magnificent through this whole movie, but man, that sequence, there's no dialogue. We have to understand very clearly what's happening entirely through Grogu and what he's doing, what he's going through. We have to read his emotions. We have to read his concerns. We have to know what the story is. And all of it is beautifully done. And we haven't talked about it yet, but man, that puppet, it's fantastic in this movie. And I know it was good in the show, but man, in this movie, it's beautifully done. And that sequence is, maybe too long. I don't know. It starts out where you're like, oh, is this just because we see time change, like we see day night, and Grogu has to figure out how to protect him while he's healing. He builds a little hut, slides it, man, it's too short. My theater,
great,
it rubs
great
it.
joke
Oh my
there.
God, it's so funny trying to get him in and then just having to cover his feet, going through the swamp, noticing the I made a note of the name. I forget it now, but the Amelians, the snake people. Do you guys remember? I feel like if I'm going to ask anyone this question, both of you will be on board for this. Do you remember the movie Inner Space?
Yep.
No, not Inner Space. Dreamscape. The two of them are tied
Yes.
together
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're both Dennis Quaid. Do you remember the snake monster?
Yeah,
from
there's
Dreamscape?
there's like Cobra
Cobra
beasts of some
person.
sort. Yeah.
The aliens that work for the Huts in this, that I was like, those look like the monster from
Similar,
Dreamscape,
and
and that thing gave me nightmares.
I'm pretty sure those are like you can spot one in the background of Return of the Jedi at
Yeah,
Jabba's palace. I'm
in
pretty sure.
Jabba's palace.
I think there was an action figure.
And
But
again, what a tie-in. The Fez
yeah,
and
no,
Filoni
yeah,
effect.
those are the things that yeah get me all giddy is when you
I love it.
see the things that are brought in from other stuff there.
Yeah.
Um. Oh yeah, there was something I was gonna say about that
The
whole
puppet.
the puppets. Oh yes, the puppets. Yeah, I mean it's been a good year for puppetry at the movies between what they do here with Grogu and the other little guys and Rocky in Project Hail Mary. That was a
Oh
puppet
yeah.
as well. So yeah, puppeteers like me are grinning ear to ear with that stuff. And yeah, this is some wonderful puppetry going
I
on.
did literally think about you while I was watching the movie. I was like, "Ooh, Todd's gonna love this. Look at how good this puppet is. Look at how good this puppet is." And I did the press tour. The fact that Grogu has been doing some of the press tour, lovely.
Yeah.
The fact that he's been appearing here and there. The story about how, for many episodes of the show, they would direct the puppeteers, and then when Bryce Dallas Howard did her episode, and she just directed Grogu, and from that point forward, everyone just directs Grogu. You don't need to talk to the 6 puppeteers. Just talk to
Oh,
Grogu. He's going to take the direction and do what you need.
as a puppeteer myself, that type of thing totally happens. I mean, like and sometimes people don't even realize they're doing it. When I was in college and we were doing this like, news magazine show as a part of my production class or whatever, and I got the job of being one of the hosts of the show as a puppet, okay? And so like I'm there holding up the puppet and the girl that's the floor director comes over and starts giving some instructions to the human host, and then she turns and starts talking to the puppet
Yep.
and giving direction, and then she realizes what she's doing and is like, I'm talking to the puppet and I was down there, so anyway.
But
Tangent.
that's the legacy of like what Jim Henson created and flows through, then both. Forgive me. Why am I blanking on Gonzo's real name?
Oh, Dave Goles.
Thank you. No.
Frank Oz?
Sorry, Fozzie.
Frank Oz, you're
Frank
thinking-
Oz.
Frank
How
Oz
did I
was
forget the name
Yoda.
Frank
Yeah.
Oz? You know what my brain went to is then the Blues Brothers, where he's handing back the stuff.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, that guy.
Right.
The the fact that Grogu is just so beautifully done, and the fact that we buy it. All of the, when he goes and collects the water, the simple thing of like he's got a water bottle, it collects the water, screws the cap back on, goes, just lifts the lid enough because he respects his father's creed, just pours the water in, then takes some of the water himself, then wipes his mouth. Every little gesture was so beautifully done, and that you just buy it 100%. Talk about, there's a clip of Jim Henson, again, the legacy of Jim Henson that this is, when he was on Arsenio's show, and he brought Rolf, the dog,
Mhm.
with him,
Yeah.
and Rolf has his arm in a sling, and Arsenio says to Rolf, because of course you would only talk to Rolf, even though Jim Henson is right there, like, oh, what happened to your arm? And Rolf is like, well, I'm a dog, right? And Arsenio's like, well, yeah. And he goes, I'm also a puppet, right? And Arsenio's like, of course. He goes, well, you see that my mouth is moving and I'm gesturing with this hand. And Arsenio's like, yeah, but what's wrong with your hand? He's like, well, my puppeteer only has 2 hands. And Arsenio's like, oh my God. Because it never occurs to you, like Kermit, Miss Piggy, Yoda, these things are just characters. We don't think about the puppeteers.
It's
to the credit of the puppeteers.
Right. Well, exactly. That's, I mean, when I used to do workshops and such, I would always tell new puppeteers, part of your goal is to make the audience forget you're there.
Yeah.
And like Jim Henson, I wish I knew, the clip probably exists out there, but there people always tell the story of there was a time when Henson was on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, I think it was, something like that. And he's there with Kermit. And Carson, he had a background in this stuff too. He was a ventriloquist in his youth, and he says to Henson, I noticed you're not, you're moving your lips when you make Kermit talk here with us. You're not hiding that fact. You're not trying to not move your lips. He says, does that, is that a problem for people when you're doing stuff like this? He says, I learned something a long time ago. When the frog is talking, nobody cares what the bearded man is doing. But kind of going on a segue here, talking about kind of the unsung performers and such, and
Yeah.
things that, like, as I was watching, I knew I was going to be on the show with you two this weekend, so I was like, there were certainly things as I was watching it, I was like, oh, that's Jeanette all over. Oh, that's Matt, and and like part of the thing that where Matt jumped into my mind as I was watching it was some of those stunt sequences, like we were talking about with like kind of the John Wick style stuff.
Yeah.
And did you notice in the end credits that they list Pedro Pascal first, and then the next in the credits is the primary stunt performer for
Lateef Crowder and Brendan Wayne.
the Mandalorian.
Mhm.
And I was like, that was pretty cool, I thought. And I mean, there is some really nice stunt fight choreography in this film. I know that's something that Matt kind of deep dives into when he's digging into to the movies that he talks about. But I was like, yeah, this is this is some
the
cool
cold
stuff.
open sequence, him battling all this. Nothing's better than seeing stormtroopers who just get thrown about. Like, that part was great. The fight he had with the bounty hunter, really good.
Well, to your point, Todd, talking about, some of the stuff that I watch, I think of like, obviously John Wick, that's, two guys that started in direct-to-video chats, Stahelski and Darren Prescott, but they would do these long sequences. And in that opening scene, you get this long sequence where it's like, and you don't really see that a lot where, just you open up the elevator door and it's you pan back and you see him going through. And it was very John Wick-like, the way he was using his blaster and like, using his rope thing to, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I definitely love that. And I think, it's one of those ways that, like, I think it was Todd or Jeanette, you were saying earlier about how when Lucas made the first 3 movies, that it was this old guy using, lightsabers, and they didn't really have this, and then he gets into the Phantom Menace, and he's got Ray Park, playing the part of Darth Maul, and suddenly it's got this, this really electric vibe to it. And it is one of those things where, yeah, it's, what I love those original 3 movies because they're just such great movies overall. But it is, I do kind of understand where Lucas is coming from, that there were certain aspects of those films that he watched how technology and movie making progressed and said, I can do more than I could back then. And so maybe I don't like the fact that he went back and redid parts of those old movies and said, the movies that you watched, I'm fixing them or whatever. But I also appreciate how he was like, okay, this was really what I wanted my vision to be, and I can actually do that now. And I think this movie leans into that enough, where it gives us enough of the old, but leans into enough of the new as well.
Yeah. I did have a moment where it's similar to when I walked out of Fantastic Four, where I was like, boy, I feel like Stan Lee would have loved that. I walked out of this and was like, boy, I think George Lucas would love this. It feels very much in line with his, I'm making some family-friendly action-adventure stuff here.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I know we've been pretty glowing on the film. I mean, I think, like I said before, there's always going to be something in me. I mean, they would have to do something really, really, really wrong to get me to not like Star Wars. You know what I mean? And
somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah. I was still happy
to watch it.
Yeah. But they. I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that Filoni and Favreau, while I think there are certainly times where they don't always make the choices that I would have, I do think they recognize that thing that you're saying there, that at its core, Star Wars is for kids.
Yeah.
Okay. And, all the folks that go in wanting it to be more gritty or what have you. Okay. That's all fine. And there's a place for that, but still there's got to be that element that's going to resonate with the 6-year-old that's going into this for the first time. And I mean, I know other people have been saying this quite vocally recently. I was saying it 20 some years ago when, the prequels came out and people were like, what's with this? What's with this Jar Jar? What's with the little kid running around saying yippee and all this kind of stuff? I was like,
it's so wizard.
Mark my words. In 20 years, the kids that grew up with this stuff, this is their Star Wars, and they're going to love it.
Yep.
And that is 100% true. My son, again, who I went to go see this movie with, he was born in 2002, the year that Attack of the Clones came out. And those ones are the ones that he grew up with more. He watched those ones more. If you ask him today, what's his favorite Star Wars movie? It's Revenge of the Sith. Okay. And there's a part of me that sinks a little bit because I want to go Empire. It's Empire. You're supposed to say Empire. But it's true. These are kids movies.
Yeah.
And if I think if you approach them in the right way, even if it's not your Star Wars, the Star Wars you grew up with or whatever, I mean, hopefully all of us can somewhere find that 6-year-old inside us when we go to the theater and watch this and be that person again for a few hours, so.
Well, also too, Den of Geek did a report about Star Wars viewing data on Disney Plus, and what they found is that when you break it down by generations, and I don't know if this is always the best way. I think just age groups is better than sort of grouping everybody in big generations. But they said like Andor, which I haven't seen yet. I need to see Andor, but that's big amongst Gen X and millennials.
Yes.
And then Mandalorian is big amongst baby boomers and Gen Alpha. And then Gen Z they're still rewatching the Clone Wars episodes, because that's kind of, the one that came out for them. And I think that's a good point, because I think when I look at different intellectual properties right now, like Star Trek, for example, they have not been able to get new viewers for years. And it's almost like people that grew up watching or that watched The Next Generation was new, that's almost where it stops. Like, it's almost like if you were born after like 86, you don't watch Star Trek. And, Marvel, right? Marvel's been having trouble getting the group after the late millennial crew from like the late 80s, early 90s. They did a great job getting them in, but they've been having trouble getting Gen Z, and they've been having trouble getting younger viewers. But the Mandalorian, Star Wars seems to have every age group, that you've got, boomers and Gen X who watched the original films, millennials who kind of came in, after, like you said, Todd, Gen Z that, watched when the second group of movies were new. And now you've got like Gen Alpha. I remember my niece, 8 years ago, drew me a picture of the Mandalorian Grogu. It's like, they're constantly, they seem to be able to at least churn new audiences. And so it's interesting that their issue isn't so much about getting new audiences. It's giving us content that everybody, is interested in. I'm hoping maybe this movie is that like, because like I said, I saw every generation there, and they were all going to see it. But to your point, Todd, everybody has their own thing, kind of like SNL. You have your own cast of SNL that's your cast. And
the
I think
cast
Star
that you
Wars
first started watching is the best cast.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I guess Star Wars is kind of like that. And, it's something that, like you said, I think Gen X out of every generation is the most gatekeeping. They're the ones who are like, no, this is our thing. This is what we, and no, nothing else. I always kind of feel like that. And I think Star Wars is maybe the biggest test of that, because there are so many different gates now to get into Star Wars.
I think it's the people, and I've always kind of felt this way, and I had this because I know what I had to go through as a kid who was a Star Wars fan, right? When we were young and Star Wars was our thing, we were bullied for liking it. It wasn't cool to be into it. Add to that for me, for being a mixed race woman, there's a whole other added layer of like, Star Wars isn't for you. And then when you add that layer to like, but now Star Wars is for everyone, as it was always intended to be. And there's this tiny little group who's very, very loud, who can't get past the, but I was bullied for liking it. Now no one has to go through what I went through. Well, I'm not going to let them like any of it. And it's such a hateful way to exist. But yeah, that's where the gatekeeping comes in, is that and I always have to remind people, it's a small group. It's such a small, tiny group of these hateful people, but they are loud, and they're loud as hell, and they know how to use a computer because that's all they do. And so the review bombing and all that crap. If you ever have the fortunate, if you're ever fortunate enough to go to a Star Wars celebration, to go to one of the cons and to see the fan base as it is loving and embracing. And yeah, I didn't like that thing, but man, it's more Star Wars. We're all happy to be here together. And that's what I think doesn't get seen, because the hateful group of the not even fan base, because those are not fans, but they're so loud. And I think that the money people overreact to that noise and not to the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the fan base who just love Star Wars. I'm just happy to see more Star Wars.
I always regret that I didn't go to the first celebration, which was here in Denver.
Yeah.
right, but shortly before the Phantom Menace opened. It was in an airplane hangar here in Denver. You know, and
And
so
fast forward that to the point where like now I couldn't get tickets for the one next year that's in
yeah,
LA because
yeah.
the ticket windows were it sold out so fast because next year's the 50th anniversary. So
Oh
this is
yeah.
the one to go to, right?
Hmm.
So I was mad I didn't get tickets. We'll see what happens, but I've been lucky enough to be to several of them, so I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's that we're doing a little bit of a crime. Not that her role is terribly big or much to talk about, but
Oh
we
yeah.
haven't mentioned Sigourney Weaver at
Yes,
all.
good point. Yes.
Let's talk. Well, I was so excited to talk about the puppet and the other stuff, but yes, let's talk about the Delphi Squadron in general.
I mean, I was like, there is a certain joy in seeing Sigourney Weaver become a part of the Star Wars universe. Okay, I'm not going to complain about that at all. But it is, there's not much to the part. I will say, it's one of those things where it's like she's there, she gets the ball rolling. It's
He
a
doesn't
seat
want to give them
behind
his
the
job.
desk, seated in a cockpit
Yeah,
part. And so there is a part of me that was like, oh, give me,
it was a thrill to see her in that flight
give
uniform.
her give her a lifter or something. No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have wanted that. I'm joking, but give her something, give her a moment.
I loved it. I thought it was good. Yes, it did make me think because sometimes you have to remind yourself, okay, timeline wise, where are we? And we're after episode 6, in the midst of like, yeah, the Empire has been defeated, but pockets are still operating here and there. So the rebellion is organizing into the New Republic and trying to figure out how do we police the galaxy now that we've destroyed the organization that was maintaining the galaxy. And so there's a lot more there if you want to dig into the politics of it, which I love Star Wars politics, but not everybody does. So just the fact that she's there to give him his job is super fun. The cameos in her squadron of Filoni and Rick
Yeah.
Fuyama and Deborah Chow and Doug Chang, who appears for like great, love it. It's so fun to see them again because they're established from the show that they're there to rescue Mando when he needs help. And yeah, Sigourney Weaver. Maybe does she need more to do? No. Does it give her a weight to her character? Yes. Could she have done more? Yeah, but not in this story. There wasn't, like you said, it's not that she's short. It is that there isn't a ton for her character to do. It is a Mandalorian and Grogu story, and they are who we're spending the time with. But did I want a little more? Maybe. But I'm very happy that she was there. And
I mean,
yeah, she looks great in that flight suit.
considering how episodic the film is structured, where there are here's kind of one adventure, and we're
Act
going to
1,
go on this,
Act 2.
taking us to this next adventure, taking us to this next adventure. I was like, she could have come along. We could have found a reason, but anyway.
Well, because the problem, I think this is where the season condensed into a movie is an issue, because I felt like she was inhabiting the space that the late Carl Weathers would have
Right.
had, and
Yeah.
you remember
Yep.
Carl Weathers, we would lose him for many episodes, but
Yep.
then we'd have like one big episode where he would be there and he would be helping to shoot out or do so it feels
The
like
episode he directed.
exactly once he directed yeah, but I think if we had this as an 8-episode thing, there probably would be 2 or 3 episodes that would be almost all her in or she would have like 40 pages of script that she would be involved in. And I think this is one of those unfortunate realities of this situation, is that we lose certain things because it's condensed. And I think Sigourney Weaver unfortunately was a casualty of that, because I think she was the perfect person to bring in now that we don't have Carl Weathers. She was perfect in this part. It's like, hey, let's bring Ripley and let's have her, and
Yeah.
I loved how she was tough. She was her own person. She wasn't just doing Carl Weathers' part. But yeah, I agree with you there, Todd. I think that's unfortunately one of the one of the things that happened here.
I think that's fair. Yeah, the Carl Weathersness of the show, because he's established very early on. He's magnificent in that show. So good. What a character. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And shifting it to like, well, now he's working for the New Republic instead of the Bounty Hunters Guild, so it makes sense that he's not interacting with Grief Karga. But yeah, that's an interesting way. I also, because it's so New Republic heavy, and at this point in the story, I was like, is this where Carrie Fisher would have been?
Yeah.
She would have loved
Yeah,
to do it
yeah.
just a little bit. Just give me a little bit. She would have loved to do just a little bit, boss some people around in a flight suit. She would have loved that. So it was kind of in between, like due to circumstances and the way things are. I think Sigourney Weaver did a great job, and she did what was asked of her with the hopes that we will get more from her. That's what I would say.
Well,
I
and
love
it's
seeing Zeb
interesting.
on the big screen too.
It's interesting you bring that up too, because one thing the film doesn't do, while there are certainly those nuggets, those Easter eggs, those things, it doesn't go for a big like, oh, it's so and so from the original trilogy type of
Yes.
thing. Like you mentioning Carrie Fisher made me think, oh yeah, you could have easily brought in a de-aged Wedge or something like that. You know what I mean? They could have
Hire
gone
Alden
for that.
Ehrenreich to be walking around in that. Sure.
Yeah, and it would have been low-hanging fruit, but
Yes.
they don't go for that kind of thing. So
it would have kind of crushed itself under the weight of its own expectations. I'm really happy it didn't do that.
Right.
Now, we're our own thing. We understand that we're operating within this universe, but we don't need to pull any of that in, and that's fine. The talking about, and that just reminded me, bringing back to where we talked about the villain issue and how, like, yes, the twins are the big bad of this movie, period. I think had this been expanded into a full season, it would have tied back to Thrawn. Right, because the two Imperials that he goes after in this movie, both in the cold open and then the other one that we pick up, Sigourney Weaver is handing him, like, we're collecting these Imperials. Here's the card set. Here's what we're going after. The two that he goes after were both in an episode of the Mandalorian show in which they're shown to be part of the Shadow Council of Imperial remnants that are trying to bring back Thrawn. They're trying to bring back Grand Admiral Thrawn. They are working in the hopes to both master cloning and bring back Thrawn. So I feel like had this tied in to an episode, we would have had the Thrawn-ness of it because Filoni is working on bringing him back. Because Filoni, like many of us, read that first series of books after in like 1983 and be like, oh my God, Thrawn is it, full stop. And so Filoni has been working on bringing him back. So I feel like that's what would have happened over the course of a full series of this. And in a way, I'm kind of glad it didn't, because that's a lot of explaining to do to a casual audience, right?
Yeah,
and you didn't have to in this one. Here's these twin huts. They're bad. That's all you need.
You talking about that has me imagining like the little stinger that they don't do, like remember
Grand Admiral Thrawn will return.
Well, remember the end of Batman Begins where Gordon gives him the Joker card. Okay?
Oh yeah. What about escalation?
Could you have imagined, if because part of the whole thing here is the deck of cards.
Yeah.
What if Sigourney Weaver had laid down a card for him and it was Thrawn? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, I think they do a good job of making this a standalone thing where you don't feel like you have to go in having caught up on everything. You don't feel like they're going to set up what's next. This movie is its own thing. And, maybe that means it's not as galaxy shattering as some other things, in some ways it is refreshing just to go and just I'm gonna watch this guy and the baby go around and mess up the bad guys for 2 hours and that's that, and it doesn't necessarily have any weight on what the next thing is. That's fine
with that.
Yeah.
Let Ahsoka season 2 be the heavy lifting of all the storylines. This one is just like, hey, Mando and Grogu go on an adventure. Great.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I guess maybe we should get ready to go into our exit question. But before we do, anything else that anybody wanted to mention that we may not have brought up so far?
I think I'm
the
good.
soundtrack.
The score.
Okay,
the
score. Oh,
yes. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
It can be a hard task to have a Star Wars movie that has no John Williams, but boy, does he do a great job. And there were moments where, like, you come in and the score when he's going into the planet with the gladiator fighting on it, like the
Sicaria, I think,
upbeat, like electronica of it. It still feels Star Wars, but also feels very new. The moments when Mando says, okay, go ahead, kid, I'm not going to fit on the ship. And he goes back and it's this huge action set piece of him just mowing through piles of cobbled together droids. The melancholy notes there as you're basically in Grogu's head thinking, well, this is it. That the score is so good. This variety on the Mandalorian theme that comes throughout. I loved it.
Yeah, it's a very good score.
Yeah, I was a huge fan too, especially like you said, when they go to that planet, it's like a very Blade Runner-y kind of feel, and that music just really sits that tone.
For sure. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, well, I guess what we'll do is we'll take a break here. We'll hear from some fellow Lambcasters, and then when we come back, we'll have our exit question.
Do you love all things rom-com, holiday, and Hallmark? If so, we have the podcast for you, the Hallmarkies Podcast. We aim to be your destination for previews and recaps of every romantic comedy and holiday film that's released in cinemas, on streaming, and on channels like Hallmark. We also cover all the Hallmark TV shows like When Calls the Heart and The Way Home. Still not enough? We have recapped every episode of Heartland, Sex and the City, All Creatures Great and Small, and more. We also have weekly ranking episodes and interviews with all your favorite stars. You can listen to Hallmarkies Podcast wherever you download your podcasts or watch on video on YouTube. Come join the Hallmarkies family today. We know you will love it.
All right, so for our exit question this week, so on my site, I've used a term for a while called Lucas. It's a verb, Lucas, and it essentially means to go back and change something that's already been published or released, harkening back to when he re-released his movies in the 1990s. So our exit question this week, with that in mind, what would you go back and Lucas from the old series? So I guess, Todd, we'll start with you. What would you go back and Lucas?
This was tough. And maybe I read when you said was I limited to the first three?
You can do anything you want. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, this was tough to think about because, like I said at the beginning, I'm fairly accepting of what they do. It's like, it's not my universe. You go with it, whatever, But I jumped back. For a while, I was thinking about, and I will mention what happens to Leia in The Last Jedi, because I thought that moment where she gets sucked out into space was going to be it, and I thought they could have done a nice job with making that be the way that we have to remove Carrie Fisher from the series because she had passed at that point, whatever. But the more I thought about it, I thought midi-chlorians. That's just, I don't need midi-chlorians. I mean, I liked the mystery that we don't know what makes the Force, I mean, because when you think about In A New Hope, it's Obi-Wan just gives a simple, the Force is what gives a Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things.
All living things.
It
Some
surrounds
people can
us,
tap into it.
penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together, And then to give us a scientific explanation about midichlorians, I'm kind of like, kind of softens what we had before there. So, I'm not going to say that midichlorians ruins anything for me, but if I had to change one thing, it would be midichlorians.
Excellent. Okay, great. How about you, Jeanette? What would you, Lucas?
That's fair. I do appreciate that Lucasing, treating your work of art as if it's never finished, right? I kind of love that. There's so many from the sequel trilogy. I'm not sure I can even touch those because there's so many things I would have liked to fix. Number one being the end of the last one. I still want the Calrissian Chronicles. I think the opportunity exists to bring back Boyega and Janna, forget the actress's name, and have Lando take them through the galaxy looking for other Force-sensitive or former stormtroopers. You don't even have to bring the Force into it. Have them recruiting former stormtroopers. Set that up. I want that. And during the course of, while Lando is there with Finn and Janna and they are collecting folks, have Lando telling them stories of this reminds me of, and then you throw back to let the childish Gambino Lando have the adventures as flashbacks. That's the show I want. I don't know that this counts as a Lucas, but if we're talking about that's something I would have set up better so that could happen. But just what I would change, and I think it's a minor change because the scenes all exist, but in Revenge of the Sith, all the stuff that he cut out, setting up the rebellion, all the Jimmy Smits bits, where Organa, Mon Mothma, Padme are intrinsic in setting up the rebellion within the Senate from the beginning. I want more of that because it gives weight to Padme. In Revenge of the Sith, she doesn't have a ton to do because all the scenes where she was doing a lot and being conflicted between I love my husband, but I feel like he's slipping. All of those got cut out, and there was so much more depth to her character, and I feel like we're robbed of that. And we're robbed of the politics, and I want more Star Wars politics. So that's the change I would make. Revenge of the Sith, I would bring back a lot of those scenes and deepen them.
Yeah, and if you feel like you can have a director's cut where people can watch the one without those scenes, and then they can with DVDs now you can just flip them over. Yeah. So now my two are definitely a lot sillier, I guess. But first and foremost, I am a fan of maybe not all of the holiday special, but I love the B. Arthur Harvey Korman stuff. In particular, I love the moment where she pours liquid into the top of his head. And I would like there to be essentially to be Star Wars' version of Ozu's teapot, where every movie there's a moment where they're in like a cantina or bar or something like that, and in the background you see B. Arthur pouring liquid into the top of Harvey Korman's head. And I also feel like, I don't know if you watched the old Carol Burnett show. I mean, Harvey Korman, there were moments where Tim Conway would just walk on set and he would burst out laughing.
Yeah.
How many takes do you think it took B. Arthur to pour with him? And you can just see B. Arthur just being like, Harvey, come on, after like the fifth time of him bursting out laughing, whatever. So,
I'm mentioning the holiday special. It's funny because the Mandalorian Grogu does reference the Star Wars holiday special, because that weapon that Mando has at the end, which I don't know what it is, but I was talking to my son about it. I was like, it's half shotgun, half fork, but that's what Boba Fett has in the animated segment from the holiday special. So
yeah, that's perfect. Now the other one for me, this one's maybe I hazard to say goofier than the other one, because the other one was pretty goofy, I guess, if but I don't know. I just feel like it's like kind of an Ozu's teapot thing, where it's just every movie you kind of look for that moment. But the other one for me is the season 3 of The Mandalorian. They had written Gina Carano's character out, but they just wrote it out. They wrote her out. She was just off in the galaxy doing stuff, as opposed to killing the character off. What I wanted was that first episode to be a funeral episode where her character has been killed off. They're in the Mandalorian's house, in his kitchen or whatever, and everybody's there. And then when they leave, he's by himself, and he's just like, damn. And that's it, just like classic Good Times right there, with Florida. But his voice doing it, and I wanted something like that. I mean, obviously that's a little goofier than I would, but that's what I would do if I had a chance to, redo the first episode. That's what I would put that in there.
It's kind of interesting, right? Because her character gets hired, brings down Moff Gideon, gets hired as a Republic marshal, and then steps up into the New Republic and then wider. So that character, Cara Dune, would have made sense to show up in this movie, working
Exactly.
with the Delphi squad, and I don't know. I would have liked them to recast it, and I could use more Cara Dune, because what a great character. But
and maybe that's why they didn't kill her off, is maybe they thought, if we go far enough away from it, maybe we can recast.
Maybe if it's a really good character, I'd love to see that recast.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, so that goes without saying. But
Well,
there's a lot of in terms of this being a squad of New Republic officers who are looking to keep the peace. There's a lot of options. Like you said, a Wedge is a good fit there. Like if you're good at bringing someone from the we didn't need it, but Wedge is a good option.
Yeah, it is interesting. So I went into this thinking because there's going to be some symmetry, because Gina Carano did that UFC fight like a week or two ago on Netflix, and I thought, there's going to be some symmetry.
Seconds?
Right, exactly, 17 seconds. And I was thinking she's going to have missed out on an opportunity, but then they really didn't bring any people from the show in this movie.
No.
And so it's interesting, but you're right, if there was any character that would have fit, it would have been Cara Dune for this. So it is interesting, did she lose an opportunity? I mean, she lost the opportunity of being on the show. I think they pivot to Katie Sackhoff, I think, in that third season, and I like that. And it's almost like they're setting up maybe a spin-off, like we had the Book of Boba Fett, and we had Ahsoka. Maybe we're getting a spin-off with the Mandalorians with Katie Sackhoff, which would be good. So maybe maybe it worked out for the best. But well, I guess this is probably as good a time to wrap this. So maybe we'll do some plugs. Todd, we'll start with you.
Of course, my podcast is called The Forgotten Filmcast. Hopefully, I'll have a new episode hitting here soon. I've been juggling some other projects, so I've been a little bit sporadic lately, but we'll try to get back on course here soon. We'll be coming up on the 300th episode soon, so that'll
congrats.
be happening here later this summer. So
excellent. How about you, Jeanette? Anything that you wanted?
Yeah, no, I don't have anything new. I have, as I've stated, pulled back my online movie reviewing presence, not on purpose, just, life, doing life stuff, and sometimes that happens. And so still going to the movies and loving them and try to just, enjoy them for what they are and to keep up with my schedule of other things. I will say I've been on both your podcasts. I always have a good time on both of them. So my plug would be that people should check out my episodes of your extensive libraries.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking, like, if you do like the pegboard with our pictures, like, we've never done a podcast together as the three of us.
But the red strings are
right, exactly. I've been on Todd's. Todd's been on mine. You've been on mine. You've been on Todd's.
Yes,
We've done the Lambcast together. I've done the Lambcast with Todd. I've done the Lambcast with you, Jeanette. So this is the first time the three of us have been together. So yeah, I agree, definitely. Yeah, and I think Monday New Adventures with Fangirl. At the very least, a lot of the movies that you've covered in the past on there, they're on sites like Disney Plus, and so people going to check out like some of the old Marvel movies and things like that. Yeah, great reviews there for sure. But before I plug mine, I want to quickly plug Richard as well. Richard, his site Kirkham a Day. Always go check that out. And also, he was on your podcast, Todd. And I'd say as much as I love all the episodes of your show, and again, Jeanette's been on as well as me. But I particularly love when you have Richard on and you guys talk 70s movies. And so that episode of the 7% Solution, which I guess will be the second to most recent but maybe possibly you'll have a new one out by then. But people should check out all the episodes. But for me personally, those are the ones I love.
Right. Love it.
Yeah. Now my site, Direct to Video Connoisseur, you can find dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's where you can find links to everything. The podcast, which again, Todd and Jeanette have both been guests on, DTVC podcasts on most major podcatchers. And my newest novel, Mark and Sales, it's available on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited, and in paperback. So I always appreciate if you want to check that out as well. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming on. This was a ton of fun.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Good
everybody
job
for listening. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you everybody for listening. And come back to the Lambcast soon. Bye, everyone.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.
Ha 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 ha